All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are tackling a really fascinating theological idea, one that might just flip what you think you know about baptism on its head. We're going to explore this concept of the household covenant and find out why, from this perspective, baptism is way more than just a personal, individual decision. Okay, let's just jump right in with a verse from the Bible that is, well, it's pretty hard to ignore. The Apostle Peter, in his first letter, says, point blank, baptism saves you. Whoa, that is a huge claim, right? And honestly, it's the key that unlocks this whole conversation. So when you hear something like that, your mind just starts racing with questions, doesn't it? Like, how can that even be? And it also makes you wonder about this kind of strange practice you see in the New Testament, the early church baptizing entire households all at once. Not just one person, but the whole family. What was going on there? All right, so to really get our heads around this, the source material tells us we need to look at a key concept that underpins the whole Bible, and that is the idea of the covenant. Okay, so here's where we can get tripped up right away. In our modern world, we think of a contract, right? It's an agreement between two equals, a handshake. But a biblical covenant? Totally different ballpark. You gotta throw that modern idea out the window. It's not a business deal. It's much more like a treaty. A treaty that a powerful king imposes on a lesser ruler he's just conquered. And this is the absolute key to this whole thing, this idea of a lordship treaty. It was never, ever just an agreement with one individual. When a king made a covenant with, say, a vassal lord, that treaty didn't just apply to him. No, it legally bound everyone under his authority. We're talking his entire family, his servants, his whole kingdom. Everybody. And these treaties, they had some very clear and very serious terms. First, there was one designated lord, the one in charge. Then you had the terms, you get blessings if you obey, but, and this is a big but, you get some severe curses if you disobey. It set up this rigid, binding structure of authority that applied to absolutely everyone, from the top all the way down. And when we say curses, we aren't kidding. I mean, check this out. This is from a real ancient treaty. The ceremony they performed involved, well, it's pretty graphic. They would dismember a ram to be a living symbol of the incredibly violent punishment that would fall on the king and all his people if they dared to break their oath. Serious stuff. Okay, now let's see how this all plays out in the Old Testament. Because this covenant relationship with God, it was marked by a very specific, very physical sign. And you see this exact model pop up really clearly in Genesis 17 with the story of Abraham. This is where God establishes his lordship covenant with him. And notice, it's not a negotiation between two parties. God imposes it. So a really important question comes up. Who actually got the physical sign of this covenant? The sign was circumcision. And this is so important to get. It wasn't just for the people who had some kind of personal faith or understanding. Nope, the sign was applied to everyone under Abraham's authority. His kids, even as young as 8 days old, every male born in his household, even his slaves, people he bought with money. They were all included simply because they were part of his household. So this one, single sign, it was just packed with layers of meaning. On one hand, it signified being united with God, a symbol of faith. But it also had this other side, a kind of built-in threat. It marked the entire household, yes, but it also carried this implicit warning, the curse for disobedience of being cut off from God's people. Okay, so now for the big question. How does all of this ancient covenant logic, this household principle, connect to the New Testament and the practice of baptism? Well, the core argument we're exploring here is that the basic structure, the fundamental principle of the covenant, it doesn't actually change. The household model stays the same. The only thing that changes is the external sign used to mark who's in. And when you lay it out like this, the parallels are pretty striking, right? According to this view, baptism just steps into the role of the new covenant sign, and it carries the exact same symbolic weight that circumcision did. It signifies union with Christ, the washing away of sins, it marks the whole household, and yep, it also includes that threat of a curse, divine judgment. You see, the sign has two sides, it cuts both ways. Think about it. Circumcision was a symbol of being cut off, while baptism is a symbol of drowning. So for the person who has faith, it's a beautiful thing. It's a symbolic drowning, a death with Christ that leads to salvation and new life. But for the unfaithful person in the covenant, it becomes a promise of a real drowning in God's final judgment. And suddenly, this principle starts to make sense of those passages we see in the book of Acts. You've got Lydia, the seller of purple goods, and the Philippian jailer. What happens? The second the head of the house believes the gospel, boom, their entire household gets baptized right then and there, brought into the covenant.
So let's bring this home. What does all of this mean for how we think about baptism today? Well, that brings us to this powerful idea of the covenant brand.
Now, this way of thinking leads to a view of baptism that's, well, it's radically different from how many of us think about it today. The idea here is that baptism isn't mainly a sign of your internal feelings or how much you understand about theology. Instead, it's presented as an objective, almost legal mark, a formal sign that says this person belongs to God's people. The imagery used to describe this is powerful. It's like a permanent brand, like a rancher brands cattle. It's irrevocable. You can't just erase it. You can't do it over. Once that sign is applied, the brand of the covenant is on you. It marks you for life as a member of God's household. And just like those ancient lordship treaties we talked about, being branded into this covenant means you are now officially under its terms. You're now subject to its incredible blessings, for sure, but also its very serious responsibilities and its solemn warnings. And here's the kicker, whether you happen to feel like it on any given day or not. And so that leaves us with a final, really challenging thought to chew on from this whole perspective. If baptism really is what we've been talking about, an irrevocable brand, a permanent mark that you belong, what does it actually mean to wear that brand today?